Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Horror Mine. My name is Vic Shy, and this is the Scare Score, where I break down horror movies and rate them on how scary I think they are. In this episode, I'll be going over the newly released 2024 American horror film, Longlegs. I'll be going over the events that take place throughout the film while rating the scares on how scary they are or attempt to be. Longlegs is a very polarizing film, but some have called it one of the scariest films of all time. But how scary is it? Sit back and relax and join me as we explore Longlegs and tally up the scare score. Our movie begins with a first-person view of someone driving a car down a snowy road. The car stops in front of a white house where a little girl is inside minding her own business. She looks outside and we see what appears to be two people in the car. She goes outside and now sees someone under a black sheet in the front passenger seat. We hear someone creepily say, "Cuckoo," and quickly retreat behind the house. The little girl comes face to face with the strange man named Longlegs, excellently portrayed by Nicolas Cage via an effective jump scare. He says it's almost her birthday, and we get one of the most unsettling transitions to a title sequence I have ever seen.
What happens if
This was a very creepy opening scene and an excellent introduction to the character of Longlegs. The character is just so odd and unnerving. I could tell Nicolas Cage was going to be the best part of the film from this scene alone. Part 1 is titled His Letters. We meet our main character, FBI agent Lee Harker, wonderfully portrayed by actress Micah Monroe. She and other agents attend a briefing to look for an armed and dangerous suspect. She doesn't say a word, but just from her introduction, we can tell that Agent Lee Harker is also a little odd. They are told to use the tried and true method of going door to door asking, "Have you seen this man?" The same method I've used for over 27 years, but using the phrase, "Have you seen my dad?" Harker gets a strange feeling about a house and is certain that the suspect is inside. She wants to call for reinforcements, but her partner insists on checking it out themselves, a choice that immediately backfires and sends him straight to the afterlife. Harker takes out her firearm and searches for the suspect alone. She finds him in an upstairs bedroom with his hands up, and he surrenders without a fight. After the incident, Harker takes a numbers generators test and seems extremely uncomfortable. She has apparently beaten the test 8 times, and some of her fellow agents think she has psychic abilities. She's obviously got some kind of sixth sense, as she was able to pinpoint exactly where the previous suspect was. She is now scoping out a house with 2 other agents where a horrific crime occurred. Her supervisor, Agent Carter, says that the Horn family was brutally murdered by the father before he deleted himself from existence. This is one of 10 similar tragic incidents that have taken place over the course of 30 years. All the crime scenes have had one piece of evidence linking them together: cryptic notes left at the crime scene signed by Longlegs. The FBI believe Longlegs has been making the fathers commit these brutal acts, but don't know how. Agent Carter wants Harker to assist with the Longlegs serial killer case, but Agent Browning doesn't think she's ready. He shows her the details of the complicated and disturbing case while asking her about her unique intuition. She describes her special ability as someone tapping her on the shoulder and telling her where to look. We also see a picture in the background of a man who did not have sexual relations with that woman. All of the families in the Longlegs case have had a daughter whose birthday was on the 14th of the month. The Horns were the only ones who actually died on their daughter's birthday. Harker starts trying to piece the case together, and we hear a disturbing 911 call made by the father in one of the cases.
Hey, what?
when her eyes are closed?
She spends countless hours going over the details of the case as we see several photos of the disturbing aftermath of the crimes, a mildly creepy scene that is more disturbing than scary. Agent Carter finds Harker asleep next to the case files and invites her for a drink. While he drinks, Harker goes over her insight on the case so far. None of the cases had signs of forced entry or any indication that Longlegs entered the houses. They were all killed by something from inside the house: a shotgun, a knife, and a hammer. The only thing linking Longlegs to these killings are the letters he's been leaving at the crime scenes.
Almost like he was never there at all.
Agent Carter compares Longlegs to Charles Manson, making them think he may have had an accomplice. The mystery surrounding this case is very interesting, especially because Longlegs himself is such an intriguing character. Harker meets Agent Carter's wife Anna and his young daughter Ruby. She is clearly socially awkward, which makes for a pretty lighthearted interaction between her and Ruby. Before she goes to sleep, Ruby invites Harker to her birthday party.
I'll be there.
Harker drives home alone down a dark road that absolutely screams serial killer movie setting. She checks her mailbox and briefly hears loud music coming from the house next door, which is completely dark. Longlegs takes place in the state of Oregon, and I love the setting. Like most people in serial killer films, Harker lives alone in a cabin that seems very cozy but isolated, which I suppose is the ideal setting for people to become victims of brutal and disturbing crimes. She calls her mom and sounds just as awkward as when she's speaking to other people. She says working on the case has made it hard for her to fall asleep. She doesn't want to share the details with her mom, but her mom saw her fair share of bad things during her time as a nurse. Harker hears a whisper behind her and someone aggressively knocks on the front door. It made me pretty nervous seeing her totally exposed from her windows. She looks outside and sees someone's silhouette in the woods. She leaves the safety and cover of her home to walk out into the dark totally exposed, which is not the best decision? We then see Longlegs walking inside her house. She goes back inside and sees a letter addressed to her that says do not open until January 14th. This was a decently tense scene that had some questionable decisions and tactics. Speaking of questionable, we're about 30 minutes in now, and this is where I started to question the claims that this is one of the scariest movies of all time. We then get a dramatic transition into part 2 titled All of Your Things. Harker identifies herself as a real rebel here by opening the letter before January 14th. It contains a birthday card for a 9-year-old with Longlegs' signature cryptic message that reads, "Stood upon the sands of the sea." There is another message on the back that Longlegs wasn't so nice about translating this time. The ink is still wet, showing that he just wrote this message. Then, something happens that is completely baffling to me. She hears a creaking noise coming from inside of her cabin, and all she does is look behind her for a split second before trying to decipher the message, which she has no problem doing. This scene simultaneously makes her the smartest and dumbest character in the film. Harker gets called out to another crime scene where Longlegs has struck again. She makes out his latest message that says "down low, too slow," and seems to be the only one who's been able to decipher his messages. The family has been dead for about a month and the bodies are completely covered in maggots. She calls her mom again and we learn that Harker's birthday is next week. Before she hangs up, her mom reminds her that saying her prayers will protect her from the devil. She continues working on the case and is still hearing odd whispers. She plays connect the dots with the dates of the murders, which form an inverted triangle. She hears a loud bang on the window and briefly sees a shadow before it disappears. She takes the discovery to Agent Carter and says that Longlegs has his own algorithm, one that is deadlier than inconsistently posting on YouTube. Most of his letters reference the Camera family farm where X marks the spot. There is also a possibility that a young girl named Carrie Ann Camera may have seen Longlegs. Her family fell victim to Longlegs while she was at school. They head to the Camera family farm and find the X's referenced in the letters. They investigate the barn and Harker follows the X's, which are horizontally turned crosses. They find a crucifix on the ground, which leads to the discovery of a hidden compartment. There is a drawing of an inverted triangle with a smiley face on it on top of a box containing a creepy doll. I knew the doll was going to open its eyes, and it still made me jump. The doll's appearance is almost lifelike, but not quite, making it look pretty unsettling. They learn the doll is handmade and has human hair on its head. There was a metal ball inside its head that gives off a strange high-pitched sound. Hearing the sound gives Harker brief, disturbing visions of snakes and leads to a flashback involving Longlegs. The doll is sitting in front of a mirror and looks like it's staring right at the audience. Longlegs appears and calls the doll Carrie Ann. He eerily says that the doll is the dark before covering her in a black sheet. The doll's face now appears demonic with yellow eyes underneath the sheet. A brief but effectively creepy scene involving Longlegs and his doll. This is about halfway into the film now and only his second appearance. Thankfully, we now get an appearance from Longlegs driving down the road jamming in his car. He goes into a hardware store and annoys the clerk. His face looks pretty repulsive and he is downright creepy. She doesn't seem fazed by his presence and calls her dad.
Daddy! Daddy! Where are you? Daddy!
Daddy.
While his appearance is brief, his presence is really unnerving and Nicolas Cage steals the show. This is the type of disturbingly crazy performance that I think only Nick Cage himself could pull off, and it totally works. Agents Harker and Carter visit the psychiatric hospital where Carrie Ann is admitted. They speak to the hospital director, who says she received her first and only visitor the previous day. He says that Carrie Ann was completely catatonic before the visit but is now lucid. The visitor log shows that Longlegs visited Carrie Ann, but he wrote down the name Lee Harker. Carrie Ann seems very disturbed and resembles the doll made by Longlegs. We see a flashback of the day Carrie Ann went to school and her family died. Longlegs' creepy doll is in the house looking very demonic. Carrie Ann says her mom hated her because she came out wrong when she was born, and we see a scar on her stomach from a C-section. We see her mother acting really disturbed as she runs a knife along her scar and stabs the doll multiple times. She says her dad was a good man, but we see him killing more cows than I do when I play Minecraft. It appears that her parents went mad with the doll at the center of it all. A priest visited their home and was taken out by the father, who then went after her mom. The entire flashback is really disturbing and seems almost like a dream that slowly turns into a hellish nightmare. The visuals on display are really unnerving, and the music box melody in the background helps create the unsettling atmosphere. Harker asks her about Longlegs' visit, and Carrie Ann says she would do whatever he asks her. She references the man down the stairs and says that she'd even kill Harker with her bare hands if Longlegs wanted. This scene is kind of a mixed bag for me. While the flashback sequence is pretty unnerving, Carrie Ann's questioning isn't as disturbing as it's trying to be. I found her character annoying rather than off-putting or disturbed, although Harker seems pretty shooketh by that encounter for some reason. We see Longlegs sitting in his basement holding a book while a demonic shadow emerges. Harker and Carter try to piece this odd case together and think that the doll has something to do with everything. Harker says in some cultures, magic dolls are used to control people, but Agent Carter doesn't buy it. He finds it weird that Longlegs knows Harker's name. He revisited her file and learned that her mother called 911 for a criminal trespass that occurred on January 13th, 1974, before Harker's 9th birthday. The description of the trespasser was tall and pale. Thinking she may have seen Longlegs as a child, he urges her to go speak to her mother to see what she remembers. Harker goes to her mother's house, and this case is clearly taking a huge mental and physical toll on her. She finally sees her mom, who doesn't sound as normal as she did over the phone. She immediately asks if Harker has been saying her prayers. Harker reveals that she's never said her prayers because they scared her, which makes her mom burst out laughing. Harker hears another ghostly whisper and gets brief visions of snakes before a flashback involving her and her mom. While washing a shirt, Harker's mom hears a vehicle approaching. She tries calling 911 but only hears static on the other end. The lights go out and she arms herself with a shotgun and the flashback ends. She asks her mom about her 9th birthday, and it's clear that her mom has some sort of mental illness. She refuses to tell Harker what happened that day and says that she was allowed to grow up unlike other people. Her mom kept all of her things and she goes up to her childhood room hoping to find a clue. We see an old chest, which leads to a flashback where I noticed something I didn't see my first time watching. Young Lee Harker is going through the chest, and the horned demonic shadow from Longlegs' basement can briefly be seen in the dark corner. My favorite scares are the subtle images that can easily be missed, because when I do notice them the second or third time around, they become that much scarier, especially because they were there the entire time. I didn't notice the demonic shadow until scripting out this episode, and I absolutely love that. Harker goes through the chest and finds an old box containing Polaroid photos. She sees a photo that leads to one of the most effective jump scares I've seen in a long time. I'm not the biggest fan of jump scares, but that was well done and really caught me off guard. This leads us into a flashback that is a continuation of the film's opening scene. It turns out that Harker is the little girl from the film's opening, and that she encountered Longlegs the day before her 9th birthday. She took a photo of Longlegs on her Polaroid camera, which is the photo she saw that led to the jump scare. Harker's mother confronts Longlegs and he stands up straight, which cuts his eyes out of the frame. He starts to sing in an unhinged way, which actually gave me chills. The film becomes more and more unsettling each time Longlegs appears on screen.
Let me in now!
She shows Agent Carter the photo and says she is sure that it's Longlegs. We get an ominous shot of his basement and see that he was in the process of making another doll. The doll's face is blank but almost seems to resemble Lee Harker. Longlegs knows that the jig is up and is standing at the bus stop waiting to get out of town!
man!
He puts his hands up and surrenders without a fight. Longlegs is apprehended by the FBI, and while Agent Harker put in a ton of work, he was actually caught thanks to Agent Carter. It seems like Harker was avoiding her mom the entire film and wouldn't have gone to visit if Agent Carter hadn't told her to do so. Also, the supposed psychic ability she had in the beginning never came back into play. It's almost like she wasted her ult on the wrong case. Longlegs is interrogated and reveals his name to be Dale Ferdinand Cobble. He asks to see Harker and wants to wish her a happy birthday. Despite Longlegs now being in custody, there is no physical evidence that says he ever committed the murders. Harker is convinced that he has an accomplice, someone that the families would feel comfortable letting into their homes. The last piece of the triangle is today, meaning that one more family may fall victim. Before Harker questions him, we get another piece of the flashback. Longlegs says he is a friend of a friend who lives downstairs. He calls him Mr. Downstairs and is most likely referring to the devil. Harker enters the interrogation room and Longlegs is delighted to finally see her again. He recalls the day Harker decided to become an FBI agent, meaning he has been keeping extremely close tabs on her life. He had a big laugh about it but says that she didn't, referring to an unknown person. He gives an absolutely unhinged monologue before she asks him about his accomplice.
A nice lady with a Bible and a congratulations!
He says that the orders came from the man downstairs and that while his work is done, he will always be a little bit everywhere. She asks him who is the man downstairs and he tells her to ask Mommy. She sheds a tear before Longlegs says Hail Satan and repeatedly bashes his head into the desk until Longlegs becomes long dead. My script writing has reached a low point from which I may never recover. This interrogation scene is amazing. The long-awaited meeting between Lee Harker and Longlegs did not disappoint. Both actors bring their A-games in this scene and I was totally engaged. Longlegs' death scene is gruesome and seeing him gasping for air while choking on his own blood was truly disturbing to watch. Part 3 is titled Birthday Girls. Agent Carter is angry because he feels Harker's interrogation of Longlegs led to his death. He doesn't believe Longlegs had an accomplice and that now the families won't be getting justice. Agent Browning and Harker go to her mother's house to question her about Longlegs' accomplice. Harker goes inside alone while Agent Browning waits in the car. Harker's mom suddenly appears behind the car and blasts Agent Browning into oblivion. Harker hears the gunshot and the devil's shadow can be seen in the window. Harker sees her mom finish off Agent Browning and is in total shock. Her mom is pointing the shotgun at a new doll made to look like young Lee Harker. Her mom shoots the doll's head, which releases black smoke from both the doll's and Harker's head. Harker falls to the ground and passes out. We then get a flashback narrated by Harker's mom, revealing her as Longlegs' accomplice, meaning Longlegs knew he wasn't going to make it in the pen as a snitch. It seems that Harker and her mother were originally going to be victims of Longlegs as the devil himself wanted their souls. Her mom begged for Harker's life and made a deal with Longlegs to become his accomplice. Her mom pretended to work for the church and delivered Longlegs' dolls disguised as gifts from the church. The devil himself was inside the dolls and possessed the fathers of the families to commit the brutal crimes. Her mom was a witness to all the crimes and made sure everything went according to his plan. There is absolutely no way none of her DNA was ever collected in those houses, especially since she literally threw up in front of one of the houses. Harker wakes up in her mother's basement, revealing that Longlegs was living there rent-free the entire time. Longlegs' magic doll made it so that Harker wouldn't know or remember anything. This was a decent plot twist that I didn't see coming. I wasn't too fond of it my first time watching, but I appreciate it more on my second viewing. She receives a phone call from a demonic voice saying she's late for Ruby's birthday party. She gets into Longlegs' car and has a complete meltdown over the totally crazy situation. She rushes over to Agent Carter's house where he and his wife are already under Longlegs' influence. Her mom is sitting on the couch and has already given Ruby the cursed doll. Harker tries getting through to Agent Carter, but it's too late. He goes into the kitchen with his wife and she isn't coming back out. Even though Longlegs is already dead, her mom is compelled to finish their work to keep Harker out of the devil's hands.
I'm doing this for you.
Agent Carter comes out with a bloody knife and Harker is forced to neutralize the threat. Her mom tries to finish the job and Harker is forced to take her out. She tries to destroy the doll but her weapon won't fire. She stares at the doll intensely as Longlegs can be heard singing Happy Birthday in the background. This climax wasn't scary, but it was very intense and had me on the edge of my seat. In the film's final scene, Longlegs says Hail Satan before blowing the audience a kiss that landed right on my cheek as the movie ends.
Hail Satan.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was Longlegs. My friends, this was a really good movie that was a little overhyped. This is far from the scariest film I have ever seen, but it is one of the scarier serial killer movies out there. I wasn't the biggest fan of this movie when I first saw it in theaters, but my second viewing really made me appreciate it. Longlegs is definitely a slow burn and takes a little bit to get going, but once it does, it's an absolutely fun ride that is led by a show-stealing performance from Nicolas Cage as Longlegs. At first, I didn't think he was in the movie enough, but now I feel that he's in it just the right amount. His performance is both mysterious and completely over the top. Showing him too much would have done the film and his performance a disservice. His unnerving performance made the film downright disturbing, while the supernatural and occult elements created an eerie, surreal, nightmarish atmosphere. Unfortunately, the scare scenes are spread few and far between. The film is at its core a serial killer case investigation thriller film with a few scary and disturbing elements throughout, earning Longlegs a mild scare score of 48%. The scariest scene in the film is the opening scene. It immediately creates a mysterious and eerie atmosphere that is felt throughout the entire film. It's an excellent introduction to the Longlegs character, who comes off as creepy and disturbing right away. It's extremely unnerving and properly sets the tone for what's to come. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for tuning in, and I cannot wait to see y'all right back here in the horror mine. Y'all stick around.